Welcome, everybody. For those of you who are still in Shabbat, Shabbat Shalom. For those of you who have already seen those stars come out and transitioned into night, into the next week, Shavua Tov, a good week to you. My name is Naomi Les, and I'm one of the founding ritual leaders at Lab Shul, and welcome to the newly reignited Fearless Fire. And we're starting with words just to kind of warm up this space, warm up this room, looking around this gallery, knowing that a lot of us are here for a lot of different reasons. We're going to really invite everybody in, just in these ancient words about fear. That here and now, I let go of fear. Fear exists. And this is called Fearless Fire, but fear exists. So maybe, just maybe, we can let it go a little bit to do the work that we need to do, make more space for the work. And we're going to use a havdalah ritual to get us into all of these spaces that we want to activate as we transition from liminal, blissful refueling, as we call it at Lab Shul, soul fuel stations, Shabbat. And let's gently wake ourselves up to go into the week reignited. So let's do these ancient words together. The words are in the chat. And sing along on La 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 if you like. Hine el Yeshuati eftach v'lo efchai ki hazi v'zimrat yavaya v'yehi li Yeshua. So there's this idea that in the ancient days of Exodus, that the Israelites, when they were leaving Egypt, they didn't just travel towards freedom and justice during the day. They traveled at night. They had to travel at night. They had to keep moving. And there was a pillar of fire that kept them going at night. So we're going to bring in that pillar of fire tonight, because movements don't stop. We got to keep it going day and night. And I'm so beyond blessed and feeling so lucky to have been working to prepare for tonight with 4 incredible presenters. And I want to share with you their names before we go into our ritual and into the flow of tonight. Their names are Carmen Mojica, Rena Branson, Aviva Zadoff, and Rabbi Danya Ruttenberg. And each one will bring another piece to this ritual to enliven and ignite us. Another just heads up is that we will be disabling the chat for most of tonight. There'll be a couple moments where you'll be able to chat with each other and to ask questions. But because of the nature of tonight, unfortunately, because reproductive justice and reproductive rights often brings out folks that that might not make our Zoom space the safest, we do have the ability to cut off the chat and to allow the ideas and the igniting to live here. And so I'm thanking our beautiful tech team way in advance right now for their loving and safe curation of our space. And that goes for our Facebook Live moderator as well. So let's begin with this liminal moment of transformation. This liminal moment of transformation that, like many of the rituals in Judaism, begins with wine. It begins with, and if you have a libation with you, if you have wine or grape juice or water or any kind of something, I invite you to have it handy. We're not going to drink it quite yet, but we do start the new week with a sacred moment of transformation, sacred space, bringing in, toasting the new, and bringing in whatever we need to bring. And if you think about the idea of transformation and of this blessing of the kiddush, of the kiddush, blessing over the wine, there is this idea that grapes transform into wine. That's actually what our translation says. And I like to think about it as there is a more rich, and the grape is fine in and of itself. It's gorgeous, it's beautiful, it's sweet. And when it transforms into wine, more flavors, more smells, it becomes almost more sophisticated, more nuanced. And that's what we're hoping for tonight. More sophistication and nuance in our understanding of reproductive rights and reproductive justice, to be able to do more to help more people. And so to get us started and to help us to maybe invite in transformation, we have an incredible guest who is going to speak and actually perform an original poem that was written for tonight about transformation. I'm so delighted to bring into this space Carmen Mojica, who is an African Dominicana born and raised in the Bronx, a midwife, a writer, a reproductive health activist who empowers women and people of the African diaspora, using her experience as a midwife to raise awareness on maternal and infant health for women, and highlighting the disparities in health in the healthcare system in the US for women of color. So a deep breath, a pause. Carmen.
Thank you, Naomi. I trusted my roommate with a reality I was still grasping at. A violation to my body that my mind registered. It wasn't the first or last time I would hear the words "me too" before it became a hashtag. Remembering how she held my pain, I looked at her, standing at the platform waiting for the train on our way to her mother's house, anticipating what would come out of her mouth. A conception with a man who relished in her suffering more than her pleasure. I didn't want to tell you, she began wistfully, as though I might punish her for finishing her sentence. Because I know how you feel about pregnant women. It was true. I had dedicated my life to the service of childbearing women. New life was always incredibly important to me, a value planted in me by the patriarchy on my knees in a pew, begging to be pure and untouched by the way Virgin Mary was, praying for the strength to do my duty as a vessel. My mind wandered to the poem I wrote in freshman year of college, a damning pro-life poem that must have made any woman in that room cringe, that I was condemning them to hell for making their choice. This wasn't the first time I had to swallow my words, but by this point I understood. Women close to me would confess the choice they had to make. And suddenly, the Virgin Mary didn't matter as much as Mary Magdalene. A woman shamed for making her own choices, and another one exalted for being obedient. She told me her plan. I asked if she would be alone. That's all that mattered to me. Co-workers, she said, would go with her. The anxiety was contagious, but my mouth knew what to say. Absolutely not. I will go with you and I will bring you home. I swore that her eyes and her smile could light up an entire subway tunnel, as though my words were a balm to the difficulty that she faced. It was an appointment early in the morning. The cab ride there was tense and silent as the moment drew nearer. You would have missed the door if you weren't looking for it. Without words, we went into the clinic. I could have cried opening that door. The fear, the sadness, and the shame that hit me in the waiting room told me these women weren't making an easy choice. But when in history have women ever had an easy go at life? Praised if you did everything expected of you, damned to hell if you chose your own journey. I will never, ever forget how she looked when she came back out. Dazed, stumbling, eyes full of tears that were streaming down her face silently, I gathered her in my arms to keep her from falling. I would realize years later that I've held women in the few hours after birth who were not yet ready to stand on their own in the same exact way. The silence on the way back home was solemn and thick. I never let her go. It would have been unconscionable. We lived in a 5-floor walk-up, and she was still too weak to go upstairs alone. My arm around her waist, I hoisted her up the stairs, down our hallway. Her body did not protest at all as I took care to place her gently in her bed. The tears did not stop, as though she had no control. How could I have ever let her go through this by herself? After I was sure she was safe, I ran out to get her pads, medicine, food when she was ready, and I retreated to my room. I sat on the edge of my bed, and right then I vowed to never, ever in my life condemn women to hell, when I could instead choose to be an angel who knows about her choices.
Carmen, thank you. And I know that this, as we were speaking this week, that this poem was living in you all week as you wrote, and took so much for you to bring it to life and to bring it to our community and to present it tonight to us, to share these intimate transformation moments in your life. So we're taking a breath here. We're actually going to open the chat for comments and reactions, and I'll try to keep my eye on if there's any important question that comes up. But I'm wondering if, Carmen, if you, after a breath or a sip of water, whatever you need, would share with us, maybe reflect for a moment the journey of what got you to this transformation. You know, we discussed, like, what did pro-life come to mean to you?
Thank you so much for inviting me to this space. I feel honored. This is the first time that I've ever shared this story, and it felt appropriate. I was raised Catholic and I was raised pro-life. And it was in college when I was actually exposed to FMLA and feminists in proper, that the idea around pro-choice had been introduced to me. And so with this experience and other experiences of having to, like, I think the difference was pro-life being an idea versus having to be that idea when people were presenting me with their real life, right? And so I've come to realize that I'm actually a lot more compassionate than I thought I would be. And being pro-life is not just like this ball of cells, whatever you may call them, right? Like, my definition of pro-life has expanded to protecting all life in all of its iterations, not just like this politicized ball of cells, but the life that women live, their right to that life, and also extends to like being anti-war, anti-things that kill people, everyone, right?
Mm-hmm.
Instead of just like this very like limited view of like life, which is debatable, right? We can sit here, but yeah.
And you had shared with me, especially for myself, this had a lot of meaning, but you had shared with me that there was an inspiration that came to you very early on in your career that kind of moved you in different ways of accessing, you know, the hardships on women and choices. Do you want to share a little bit about that?
So part of that was like having like close people close to me have to make these choices.
Yeah.
And then the other part was like learning and reading. And actually, and I'm hoping this is what you're referring to. When I was asked to do this particular and share in this particular space, the first thing that came to me was the Red Tent, the book, the novel. Um, and I shared with Naomi that like we had, like, as a Catholic, I learned the Old Testament version of the story of the rape of Diana. And then the Red Tent, it goes into a fictionalized version of her story. And like that, as I was writing this poem, I was like, how does this relate? How does this relate? And then I remembered that for Jewish women, this is one of the women that is could be potentially wrapped in this mystery of like her life was controlled by men and that she had no words. But if you read the book, it talks about how there was very much a lot of choice, and that women and people that have uteruses have taken their reproductive health into their hands even before the 21st century. And so that's where I drew my inspiration from.
Mm.
Funny enough, most of the feminists in my life in college were Jewish. So that's why I keep saying that this is a full circle moment that I get to perform in front of all of you as
Mm.
you're opening up your Shabbat and moving on to the new week, because
Mm.
it's very meaningful and like right on time.
Well, we are so grateful to you, and I know that the comments, you'll see them in a moment. The comments are coming into the chat. A lot of folks resonating with your story. Grateful that you're sharing, witnessing your transformation, and inspired by your words and your experience. And I know that this poem, it's a brand new poem. It literally, the ink is still drying on it. It will be available for people to see on your website. That we're going to post in the chat. Thank you, Sylvie. And if you want to learn more about the work that Carmen does, or you can follow her on Instagram as well too. And I just want to invite you in for a moment of blessing, Carmen, if you're willing, as we move from this first piece of transformation from Shabbat, from this sacred holy time out of time, into the week, into kind of waking us up. This blessing of transformation. I'm going to lift my cup. If you have a cup too, and if anybody else brought a cup, we're gonna toast you, and we're gonna toast this work, that we will continue to be transformed, and our ears and hearts will continue to be opened, like the petals on a flower. So, would you share with us the blessing, and then I'll sing it for everybody.
Yeah. A toast. In the presence of the infinite, we savor the blessing of transformation, vine to wine.
Brucha atya Eloheinu ruach haolam Borei peri hagafen Borei peri hagafen. Thank you, Carmen. And we will continue to work this path through our havdalah ritual into the visamim, the scent, which scent just wakes us up, wakes up all of the senses in us. And we're going to be woken up right now by a newer friend, totally a fangirl myself, of this incredible woman who has just done a lot for me as a parent, in her incredible book, Nurturing the Wow, and was behind, fun fact, this entire national weekend of Repro Shabbat with NCJW, National Jewish Council of Women. Her name is Rabbi Danya Ruttenberg, and she serves as the Scholar of Residence at NCJW. She didn't just write the book that I mentioned. She wrote 7 books. She's an accomplished author, and also writes a monthly column for MSNBC. Rabbi Ruttenberg, I invite you to wake us up.
Needless to say, this is, I'm going to be talking a little bit about grown-up hard things, a little warning in terms of who might be around you. Stephanie is a storyteller with We Testify, which is a group that collects stories about abortion. Stephanie got pregnant at 17. Parental involvement laws in her state meant that she either needed the notification and presence of her parents to get her abortion or the permission of a judge. She considered ending her life. Eventually, though, she found a hotline that referred her to some pro bono help. She wrote, I spent the next 2 weeks working at my waitressing job, saving up my tips for my abortion, attending classes, and gathering all the documentation the attorney requested. I had an ultrasound, and I was forced to see it, even though I didn't want to. I had to gather police records from the times my father was charged with child abuse after beating me and leaving me with bruises. She also had to gather school transcripts and write an essay, and to hand all of this over to a county judge who would decide her fate. She wrote, although I've both worked and studied since I was 13 years old to support my family, when it came to my body and my life, I was told that I was not capable of making my own decisions. My abortion was a means of survival and self-preservation for a future I wanted to live on my own terms. Of the people who can get pregnant, which includes cisgender women and also trans men, some non-binary people, and other gender non-conforming folks, of the people who can get pregnant, 1 in 4 will have an abortion by the age of 45. People who need and who get abortions come from every kind of community and every walk of life. Abortion is a Jewish issue, and it's an everybody issue. As reproductive justice activist We Testify founder Rena Branson Sherman puts it, everyone loves someone who had an abortion, whether they know it or not. What a lot of people don't know is that reproductive freedom is a Jewish value as well. The most fundamental text underlying our understanding of abortion rights is in the Parsha, the Torah portion that Jews read this morning. It discusses a case of 2 men who are fighting and accidentally push over someone who's pregnant, who then miscarries. The verses specify that the guilty party would be liable for manslaughter if, and only if, the pregnant person themselves die. The damage otherwise, if it's just miscarriage, then they pay damages, they pay financial damages. The fetus is not regarded as a person. The miscarriage itself isn't read as manslaughter. The Talmud then elaborates on this line of thinking and makes it clear that the fetus does not have the status of personhood. They describe it as mere fluid for the first 40 days after conception, which gets you to about 7 or 8 weeks of gestation as we count it now. The fetus is part of the pregnant person's body for the rest of the pregnancy. This led many rabbinic authorities to rule, like ultra-Orthodox authoritative decisor, Rabbi Eliezer Waldenberg did, that abortion is valid when terminating might cause, quote, suffering and emotional pain. Needless to say, people who are forced to carry pregnancies to term against their will or desire experience suffering and emotional pain. And people often experience other kinds of pain, very literal kinds of pain as well. Those who lack access to reproductive health care, which is disproportionately people of limited financial means, people of color, young people, and immigrants, are more likely to live in poverty and remain in abusive relationships. Limiting abortion access has a direct correlation to increased rates of unsafe abortions, which are themselves a leading cause of death worldwide. Okay, this is a lot. So before we continue, a few definitions. So reproductive health, it talks about directly servicing someone's reproductive health needs. So that can be access to affordable birth control, abortion access, affirming reproductive medical care for trans and non-binary folks, access to assisted reproductive services and things like that. Reproductive rights are individual legal rights to reproductive healthcare services, right? It's about keeping abortion legal. It's about standardizing sex ed. It's about increasing access to family planning. reproductive justice brings a racial and economic justice framework to the work for reproductive freedom. So the reproductive justice movement was founded in 1994 by Black women and continues to be led by Black women, Indigenous women, and other women of color through organizations like Sister Song, Sister Reach, In Our Own Voice, and the National Latina Institute for Reproductive Justice. They remind us through their work that not everybody has a choice and not everybody has the same choices. Right? It's not enough for abortion to be legal if it was too expensive or too far away to access. It's not enough for abortion to be legal if the mandatory waiting periods mean that some people have to miss multiple days of work for unnecessary medical appointments and they can't afford to do that. It's not enough for abortion to be legal if the pill for a medication abortion has to be picked up at a clinic or a hospital during working hours, during a deadly pandemic, potentially while childcare is canceled because there's no school. It's not enough for abortion to be legal if someone under the age of 18, like Stephanie, who's trapped in an unsafe home environment, is burdened with how to figure out parental consent laws, right, is harmed by ultrasounds, and is forced to save her own life by Googling. It's not enough for abortion to be legal if there are still stories like Alejandra Pablos, who told We Testify, I became pregnant because comprehensive sex education wasn't a thing. And I knew the current political situation would devastate the family I would create. The same people who would force me to continue my pregnancy are the same people who would rip my baby from my arms and deport me because of my immigration status. I chose an abortion, she said, because I know that when a mom is separated from her daughter, whether it is a country that separates them or an immigration prison, you might as well rip her heart out. I know this because my mother had to suffer through our separation once. I was detained in an immigration prison for 2 years. I cannot begin to think of planning a family when I know the system that I'm facing here. Not everyone has a choice, and not everyone has the same choices. The reproductive justice movement is about transforming systems so that they are just for everyone. It's about the right to decide whether and on what terms to have children and to raise those children in safety with access to clean water, unlike what the residents of Flint, Michigan had for many, many years, right? Free from police brutality and free from the school to prison pipeline. It's about the larger context in which we live, as Alejandra knows all too well. Over 450 state laws restricting access to reproductive health care have been passed since 2011. And 16 cases that are potential challenges to Roe v. Wade are just one step away from the Supreme Court. This work is critical, it is urgent, and it is our work. Judaism teaches that we are each created in the divine image. Kavod Briot, or upholding human dignity, and pikuach nefesh, preserving life, including and especially that of the pregnant person, are the cornerstones of our tradition. We are taught that we are responsible for the care of the collective. We are taught to pursue justice, and we are taught to empower and protect those who are most marginalized in our society. This is all work that is related to reproductive health, rights, and justice. For the past 128 years, the National Council of Jewish Women has been working to create a world in which everyone, no matter their income, their race, their gender identity, their location, or their sexual orientation, have the right to live their lives with dignity, including the right to build their families as they choose. We must not remain idle while barriers to healthcare place anybody's health, their well-being, or their autonomy, or their economic security at risk. Taking up the fight for reproductive freedom is all of our sacred obligation.
Well, is everybody awake? Thank you, Rabbi Ruttenberg. Thank you. I know just even for myself, I consider myself a feminist and an activist in this area. And there are even things that you mentioned tonight that I did not know. So what that says to me is that I have to remain vigilant in keeping myself up to date, continuing to learn, and being proactive in accessing this information. And so we're so lucky and blessed that you are there as this national force to keep us focused. And thank you for being with our community tonight. And thank you for bringing your spirit as well.
Thank you.
We're gonna get fired up in a second, but let's take a moment in this havdalah frame and ritual to acknowledge that we have an opportunity every Saturday night as we come out of the bliss of Shabbat to reawaken ourselves, to prepare ourselves for the week. Would you share with us the blessing for waking us up? And I want to invite everybody that if you have something representative, it could be anything fragrant. I have some herbs in here, some beautiful spices that are a mixture of things that are really pungent and things that are sweet and things that are not sweet as well too, because that's what it takes. It takes love and it takes kindness and it takes fire and a little bit of righteous indignation to stay vigilant in this work, all of it mixed together. So I invite you, as Rabbi Ruttenberg shares with us the English translation, to breathe in what you've woken up to tonight.
In the presence of the infinite, we breathe in the fragrant spices of life.
Ruach Atya Eloheinu Ruach Haolam Boret Minei Vesamim Boret Minei Vesamim Hayanai 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 So we're ready to get fired up. Are we ready? I can't see everybody in the gallery. I can only see a few people on top, but I know there are nods happening right now. I feel it through the Zoom room waves. So Rabbi Ruttenberg, I know there are a couple things that you want to wake us up to, and then we're going to be inviting in a colleague of yours and mine from the local chapter of NCJW right here in New York, Aviva Zadoff, to tell us about some things that are happening right here in New York City. But would you first share with us what's happening on the national front that we can get active in?
So this is a really critical time for abortion access. As you probably all know, the Supreme Court is not stacked auspiciously, which means that we need to pass, we have always needed to, but now really need to pass some legislation. So there are two bills that are going to be present in this next round of Congress, in this, this convening, that are really critical. One is known as WIPA, which would invalidate onerous state restrictions blocking access to abortion. And the other is the Each Woman Act, which would ensure that affordability of care for everyone, meaning basically that people who are on Medicaid could have their Medicaid fund their abortion, which is really critical when you understand how systemic racism has created economic barriers that mean that 30% of Black women and 24% of Latino women aged 15 to 44 are currently in Medicaid, which is compared to 14% of white women, right? So this is really, it's an economic justice issue, it's a racial justice issue. The Each Woman Act would basically abolish the Hyde Amendment, which has been a horrific burden for a very long time. In the chat, there is a link now to basically an easy peasy 3-click way to message your members of Congress, your senators and your congressperson to say, please pass the Each Woman Act and WIPA. Just fill in your information and we will pull up your zip code and you can just, we have a letter for you. We've already written it. Our people, NCJW's legislative team has been involved in helping to write the WIPA and the Each Women Act. So we are making it as solid and just as possible. Obviously there are a lot of cooks in the kitchen, but we are, I think, doing really good work. This is important. So please just click through, contact your people, and let's pass some laws.
And I just want to name that I would just recommend everybody that any links that are in the chat that are tonight, you just click them open and come back and you bookmark all these to come back to as soon as we're done tonight, because there's going to be more information coming too. So Rabbi Ruttenberg, thank you. And I want to invite in Aviva Zadoff, who is the Director of Advocacy and Volunteer Engagement. Rabbi Ruttenberg will be here. We're going to open up the chat room again, just in case you have questions, and you can actually write to Rabbi Ruttenberg directly if there are questions in the chat about what she has shared, if there are clarifying questions or you want more information, and she can respond to that. And while that's happening, we're going to bring in Aviva Zadoff from NCJW New York to share with us what's happening in New York. How can we get involved?
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. If we can start the slideshow, that would be great. Perfect. So about 2.5 years ago, NCJW New York, the local section of NCJW, launched our Pro-Truth campaign. Pro-Truth is an education and advocacy campaign focused on exposing the truth about crisis pregnancy centers, also known as fake abortion clinics. A crisis pregnancy center, or limited service pregnancy center, when we're talking about it in a legal sense, is a facility set up by anti-abortion activists whose goal is to provide anti-choice counseling in an effort to discourage people who are or think they might be pregnant from having abortions. With names that sound like real health clinics, exam rooms with medical equipment, and workers wearing medical scrubs or white coats, fake clinics mislead people into thinking that they are full-service reproductive health care providers, but they are often not licensed to provide any medical care or very limited medical services. Fake clinics are the service arm of the anti-choice movement, and they exist solely to convince pregnant people that they should not terminate their pregnancy. And they often lie to scare people when necessary to achieve their goals. They often attract patients by offering free services and target low-income neighborhoods. And so I wanted to show you a couple examples of what a crisis pregnancy center looks like. We can go to the next slide. So here you see two clinics that are actually located across the street from each other in the Bronx. One is real and one is fake. And the one on the left is fake, but you wouldn't know it, seeing that they're advertising, their pregnancy options. Next slide, please. Here are two clinics. One is a crisis pregnancy center, one is real, with very similar names. Both have the word choices in them. And the one on the left, again, is fake, although, it would be hard to tell just from looking up their names. Then next slide. And here are two websites, one from a legitimate clinic and one from a fake clinic. They both have a similar look and feel to them. They use similar words. I know you can't read them all very well on the screen, but they talk about women's services, women's choices, and the one on the right is the fake clinic. So we decided to launch Pro-Truth because many people don't know what crisis pregnancies are. And if they do, they often don't know that they exist right here in New York. In New York City alone, we have over a dozen CPCs, which is what we use the shorthand for crisis pregnancy centers. And across the state, we have identified over 120 crisis pregnancy centers. They're here the same way that they are everywhere across the country. And so we wanted to do something to bring awareness to this issue. Pro-Truth is a coalition effort led by NCJW New York, bringing together advocates, community-based organizations, providers, and lawmakers. Our goal is to educate and advocate around CPCs. We work to educate at-risk people to inform them that these fake clinics exist, so that they can protect themselves and their peers from falling victim unwittingly to their deceptive tactics. And we partner a lot in this work with organizations who work directly with these communities because they have connections and a trust in the community that we do not. And so one way that you could get involved with Pro-Truth is by helping us spread the word. If you have connections to community leaders or organizations that might be interested in this subject, you can let me know. My email is going to be in the chat at some point. So you could always reach out to me because we love to make connections and continue to spread the word. Pro-Truth has a website, which is a hub of information and resources that we've created materials, information materials, and we work to distribute them. And we have a large social media following to spread the word. You could find out so much more about all of our work at protruthy.org or following us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at IamProTruth. We go back to the map slide, sorry. We also advocate, and we are working on legislation and policy changes to address the harm done by CPCs. We're not looking to shut down these places. Everyone should be able to get the care that they want, but we do think that these places need to be transparent about their services and should be regulated and overseen by appropriate government agencies. This is a map that can be found on protruthy.org that identifies all of the crisis pregnancy centers as well as legitimate healthcare centers across the state. Next slide, please. One of the ways that we are currently working to legislate these places is through a study bill. We're trying to create a state law that would require the New York State Department of Health to conduct a study of limited service pregnancy centers. There is so much that we still don't know about these places and how they operate. There is a layer of secrecy around these places, and this bill would mandate a study to gather information like how they're financed, what's happening in these facilities, or the demographics of their clients. And we think it's important that a nonpartisan, objective party without political or policy agendas do the information gathering so that we can better understand what is happening and we can make sure that these places are better overseen and regulated. Next slide. So you can get involved with this work that we are doing, trying to legislate crisis pregnancy centers here in New York by signing up for our Pro-Truth listserv, where you'll get information and updates as we have action items for you to take part in during this session of the New York State Legislature. So the link is in the chat to sign up for the Pro-Truth listserv. And next slide. And you could also get involved with our Advocacy Leadership Committee, which works on not only the Pro-Truth campaign, but a whole host of reproductive rights and justice work. The Advocacy Leadership Committee is a multi-generational interfaith group of individuals committed to affecting social change. And you can find out much more about it and about all of our different work by emailing me. My email is in the chat for anyone who wants it.
Aviva, I'm just lit up right now. I'm literally fired up from everything that you just shared with us. Such incredible work. And it's a small and mighty team at NCJW New York, correct? So you really have your hands in a lot. You have rolled up your sleeves on behalf of so many. And we're so grateful that you were able to take this time out of your weekend to be with our community and to help light us up too. And I'm hoping that folks will get involved and volunteer and at the very least stay educated and be able to communicate outwards with other people. It would be such an honor to have you share with us the blessing of fire, of the lights of the fire. And looking around this gallery, I want to invite anybody who has something to light, a havdalah candle, whatever you have that will light up, to bring that light into this space right now. I have mine right here, but for fire reasons, because I'm holding a guitar and everything in my room is wood, and it's just not a safe call for me. So I'm going to call in and count on all the fires that you're lighting as Aviva takes us into this, almost the last blessing of havdalah, of this transition into our week. Would you share with us the blessing?
A blessing in the presence of the infinite. We witness the many faces of fire.
Yes, look at all these faces of fire. Brucha atya Eloheinu ruach haolam Borei meorei ha'esh Borei meorei ha'esh. So we're heading into the end of our time together tonight. Hopefully, you know, I'd love to see if we have the chat room open. What are the feelings? What are the inspirations that are coming to you to share that in the chat? What are you fired up about right now? What might you commit to doing around these issues of reproductive rights and reproductive justice? And that is this distinction between what we do on Shabbat and what we're ready to do during the week. This havdalah, this last blessing that we have that really raises up the idea that it's good to be in sacred liminal space and to refuel ourselves and to rest. It's key, it's critical in the fight for justice. And now we're ready to go into the next space, from that holy space of Shabbat to the active, action-oriented, and also holy space of the week. We've accomplished a lot in this fight for reproductive rights and reproductive justice. Let's not forget what we have accomplished, but there is more to do. So we'll start tonight, this week, finishing havdalah and saying a new blessing to kick off the week. So let's say this last blessing of havdalah, and then I'm going to invite in a brand new blessing, one that was just written this month by myself and Rabbi Jill Hammer. But first, a pause. In the presence of the infinite, we embrace the balance of distinction, elevating life's moments, both holy and ordinary. Brucha atya Eloheinu ruach haolam Hamavdila ben kodesh lechol Hamavdila ben kodesh lechol. One note that we have been sharing the blessings for havdalah. Hebrew is a gendered form, and so we have activated the Hebrew gender of female tonight, knowing that it speaks to women, but it also hopefully one day will have a form of Hebrew that will speak to all genders and invite them in. But here is our final blessing for the night before we invite in a final powerful anthem to lead you out into the night. And I'm going to ask that this be brought up on the screen so we can see it together. And what I'd like to do is I'd like to invite you to say this with me, though we're not going to allow unmuting because it would be a disaster. I will invite all of the presenters that are able to and want to join me to unmute themselves, or our tech team can invite them to be unmuted as well. And to step into this newly written blessing for reproductive rights and reproductive justice. We'll say it in Hebrew and then in English. Brucha at ya Eloheinu ruach haolam al gufenu ve'al bichirotenu. A breath. In the presence of the infinite, we bless our bodies and our choices. We have the power to do so. And so I want to invite in, to close us off for the evening and send us out into the night, a powerful voice in the next generation. I'm Gen Z, I'm old news already, but Rena Branson is the founder of a Queer Nigun Project, which organizes community singing events for LGBTQIA plus folks, and sends Jewish spiritual audio content to people who are incarcerated in New York City jail. And you can hear her stuff. We're going to put her information on in the chat. Rena has written an anthem. I stumbled upon this through the Jewish Social Justice Roundtable listserv, and I said, this is the anthem of our time. This is the anthem of this movement for reproductive rights and reproductive justice. Rena, take us home.
Thank you so much. This song has a line of Hebrew in it. I just want to tell you what it means. Shira chadasha shibechu ge'ulim leshimcha al sfat hayam yachad kulam hodu. With newborn song, liberated people praised your name on the lip of the sea. All were one in thanks. This is our collective past, and this is my prayer for our collective future. And we're going to keep working towards it together. We will not underestimate our power any longer. We know that together we are strong. We will not underestimate our power any longer. We know that together we are strong, like drops of water shape the rocks as they rush down the falls. We know that together we are strong. Shira chadasha shibchu ge'ulim leshimcha al sfat hayam yachad kulam hodu. Like drops of water shape the rocks as they rush down the falls. We know that together we are strong.
Rena Branson, thank you. Thank you to each one of our incredible presenters and artists tonight, Rabbi Danya Ruttenberg, Aviva Zadoff, Carmen Mojica, and our incredible force behind this, our incredible tech team, Marika and Sylvie and Beckett, and we have Sarah and Sam here, and Shira is holding space on our Facebook Live tonight. I invite you, the chat should be open. Say hello, go out into the night, fired up, ready to take on this week. This is Fearless Fire. We will be continuing this program with different causes and justice issues that we want to activate and highlight for you. We hope that you enjoyed this, were stirred by it, your waters were troubled by it, and that you will make good trouble out there in the world as well too. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And Rena and her entire group will take us out. The link to her recording of this will be in the chat as well for you. Shavua Tov. Have a good week. Good night.